Something shifted this week that most people aren't talking about, and if you're collecting Social Security, you need to hear every single word of this. The Supreme Court just made a ruling that directly touches your monthly check. Not next year, not someday, right now. And Washington didn't exactly send you a letter explaining what changed or what you're owed. Here's what we know after decades of watching government programs squeeze the people who actually worked for this money. When a ruling this size drops on a Friday, they're hoping you won't notice until the news cycle moves on. That's the oldest trick in Washington's playbook. But the $2,000 check conversation is real. It's moving. And seniors across this country deserve to know exactly where it stands, who qualifies, and what steps you need to take before the window closes. So, let's cut through the noise, skip the political spin, and talk straight numbers. Because this is your retirement, your money, and you earned every single penny of it. Now, let's start right where that matters most, the Supreme Court ruling. Because there have been a lot of headlines this week, and most of them are either exaggerating what happened or completely burying the real story underneath legal language that nobody over 65 wants to decode after dinner. Here at Senior Pension Guide, we break this down the way we break everything down. Plain, honest, and straight to the point. The court's decision this week carries significant weight specifically because it touches the administrative authority of the Social Security Administration. What that means in plain English is this. For years, there have been legal battles over how much power federal agencies like the SSA have to interpret their own rules and apply them however they see fit. And seniors have been on the losing end of that equation more times than we care to count. Courts have now placed a stronger check on that kind of unchecked bureaucratic authority. That is a big deal. That is not a small procedural footnote. That is a fundamental shift in how your benefits can be managed, adjusted, and frankly manipulated without your knowledge or consent. Think about what that actually means for your life. It means that when the Social Security Administration tries to quietly change how they calculate your cost of living adjustment, or when they decide internally that certain groups of seniors qualify for fewer benefits based on their own internal interpretation of the law, there is now a stronger legal foundation to push back against that. Courts are saying the agency cannot simply be the judge, jury, and executive of its own rules without accountability. And if you've spent any time dealing with the SSA, waiting on hold for 2 hours, getting denied for benefits you clearly qualify for, receiving letters that contradict what you were told 6 months ago, you understand exactly why this ruling matters on a personal level. Now, here is where we want to be careful with you because we respect you too much to hype this beyond what it actually is. This ruling does not put a check in your mailbox tomorrow morning. It does not automatically reverse a bad decision the SSA made about your specific case. What it does is change the legal landscape in a way that advocates, attorneys, and lawmakers can now use to fight harder on your behalf. Think of it like this. If you've been in a negotiation where the other side kept moving the goalposts and someone finally came in and said, the goalposts are fixed and they cannot be moved, you haven't won the game yet. But now at least you're playing on a fair field. That is what this ruling represents. And that matters enormously for the long game. Now let's talk about the $2,000 checks, because that's the part of this conversation that really gets people's attention. And rightfully so. There is real movement happening in Washington right now around supplemental payments for seniors. And we want to walk you through exactly where that stands without the spin and without the breathless overstatement you get from people trying to get clicks. There have been multiple proposals circulating in Congress, some attached to broader Social Security reform packages, some standing on their own, that would provide a one-time or recurring payment of up to $2,000 specifically to Social Security recipients who fall below certain income thresholds. These proposals are not brand new. Versions of this idea have been floating around since the pandemic era when stimulus checks went out to most Americans. But seniors, particularly those on fixed incomes, those who had already retired and weren't collecting wages, often felt like they got the short end of that stick. And they weren't wrong to feel that way. The political pressure has been building since then. And what's changed now is the alignment of both public pressure and legislative momentum in a way we haven't seen in a while. Here's what you need to understand about how these things work in Washington, because we've watched this process play out for a long time. A proposal becomes a bill. A bill gets argued over, amended, stripped down, beefed back up, and eventually either dies in committee or gets enough votes to move forward. Right now, the $2,000 check proposal has more traction than it's had at any point in recent years. And the reason for that is simple. It's an election-sensitive environment. Seniors vote in higher numbers than any other demographic, and politicians on both sides of the aisle are feeling the pressure to show up for the people who showed up for them at the ballot box. That's not cynicism. That's just how the system works. And we'd rather you understand it clearly than be surprised by it. So, what does the current version of the proposal actually look like? The most serious version being discussed would target Social Security recipients who receive monthly benefits under a certain threshold. Most proposals are floating somewhere around $1,800 to $2,000 a month in current benefits as the qualifying ceiling. If your Social Security check is below that number, you would potentially qualify for the supplemental payment. The payment itself in various versions of the bill ranges from a flat $400, which would essentially be a fourth stimulus-style check, all the way up to $2,000 in the most generous proposals. There are also versions that would structure this not as a lump sum but as an increased monthly amount spread across several months, which some advocates actually prefer because a lump sum can affect your eligibility calculations for other assistance programs. And that right there is something we want you to pay very close attention to. If you receive Medicaid, if you receive SNAP benefits, if you receive any kind of means-tested assistance program, a sudden lump sum payment can temporarily push your countable income or assets above the eligibility threshold and disrupt benefits you depend on. This has happened to seniors before during prior stimulus rounds, and it created real hardship for people who thought they were getting help but ended up losing other critical support in the process. We're not saying don't take the money. We're saying know the rules before the money arrives so you can plan accordingly. Talk to your local area agency on aging. Talk to a benefits counselor. Do not just cash the check and assume everything will sort itself out, because sometimes it doesn't, and the government is not quick to fix those problems when they happen. Now let's spend a few minutes talking about the bigger picture here, because the Supreme Court ruling and the $2,000 check conversation are really two symptoms of the same underlying issue. And that issue is the long-term financial instability of the Social Security system itself. The Social Security Trust Fund, based on the most recent trustees report, is projected to face a significant shortfall within the next decade if nothing changes. We are talking about potential automatic benefit cuts of somewhere between 20 and 25% across the board if Congress does not act. Social Security will not disappear. The program is not going away. But without legislative intervention, the math simply doesn't work the way it currently does, and benefits as they exist today are not guaranteed at their current levels indefinitely. That is the honest truth. And anyone who tells you otherwise is either uninformed or they're telling you what you want to hear instead of what you need to hear. This is why the Supreme Court ruling matters beyond just this moment. It's part of a larger conversation about accountability, about who controls the decisions that affect your financial security, and about whether the people running these systems have to answer to the law the same way everyone else does. The answer should always be yes, and now there's a stronger legal framework to enforce that answer. Here's what we want you to actually do with this information, because information without action is just noise. First, go to the Social Security Administration's official website, sa.gov, and create or log into your My Social Security account if you haven't already. In that account, you can see your complete earnings history, your projected benefit amounts, and any recent changes or notices tied to your specific record. If something looks off, you want to know now, not when you get a confusing letter 6 months from now. Second, stay engaged with what's happening legislatively. Not in a panicked way, not in a doom-scrolling through social media way, but in a steady, informed way. Sign up for updates from your congressional representative's office. When bills related to Social Security move through committees, those offices often send constituent updates. You have more power in this process than you think, especially right now when legislators are paying close attention to what seniors in their districts care about. Third, and this is the core philosophy here at Senior Pension Guide, make sure your overall financial house is as solid as it can be, regardless of what Washington does or doesn't do. Know exactly what you spend every month. Know exactly what you have in savings. Have a plan for unexpected medical expenses because they will come. And if you have adult children or family members who are in a position to understand your financial picture, now is a good time to make sure they do. Because here's the thing that keeps coming back every time we talk about Social Security, government programs, and all the uncertainty that comes with them. The government is not your retirement plan. It was never supposed to be. Social Security was designed to be one leg of a three-legged stool. The other two legs are personal savings and any pension or retirement income you built through your working years. The best way to get through uncertain times is to stay informed, stay engaged, and make the strongest decisions you can with what you have right now. The Supreme Court ruling this week is a step toward accountability. The $2,000 check conversation is a signal that seniors are being heard, but your financial security cannot hinge entirely on whether or not a bill passes or a ruling gets implemented the way it should. You deserve better than that. Real financial peace has never come from a check the government sends you. It comes from understanding your money, managing your money, and refusing to let fear or confusion make your decisions for you. So stay with us here at Senior Pension Guide as we keep watching how this plays out, because this story is not finished, and neither are you.